Our first speaker is Susan Metzger.
I normally speak to you from the table, but I want to emphasize that today I'm speaking as a resident of Orange County and a rider of the Port Jervis line. And I want to extend our appreciation to President Eric and everyone in the MTA bus company for quite a long time now and continuing until the end of the year. MTA Bus is providing a secondary bus service, another entire bus company almost, to Orange County. At present we have 60 buses and more than 140 runs through 6 different routes. MTA Bus is providing alternate service to the Port Jervis line until the damage that has been done by the hurricane can be covered. We appreciate this service. We recognize that we are a very different environment than what our normal MTA bus drivers are accustomed to. And on top of that, they have to deal with the fact that our road infrastructure is also jeopardized. So it's not an easy run for them. We appreciate it, and we thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That was very nice, Susan, actually. Next speaker, Mr. Bolt.
At the
No, come on, Murray, speak.
At the New Jersey Transit meeting a week and a half ago, I demanded that the 380 new buses that they bring in have digital speed indicators and not speedometers. I make the same demand of the buses I bought on order at the MTA, that they have digital readouts of the speed and not an analog. The change from a needle to a number represents a cultural change in the way we think. Our inability to give up tachometers on automatic transmission cars and speedometers that have a needle represent the inability of our society as a society to move forward. I will spend my time in the near future demanding that the buses have digital readouts. It's representative of the change in thinking of the 20th century and the 21st century. Much of what I've heard here this morning revolves around that change in thinking. The inability to make decisions based on reality of today. How do we begin to make those changes? Well, the digital indication of speed is so simple and so straightforward that I will use it as a representative. Last time I came here, I used an iPad. Now I use a smartphone. Some of the information presented by the MTA comes out very well here. The home page of the MTA is represented quite adequately here. The books that you've given out do not come here. You need to move from the distribution of paper to the distribution of information electronically. That's the same as moving from an analog speedometer to a numerical speedometer. The sooner you make that transition, the easier it will be to promote the things that we need to do. Now, how do we get there? It's your problem. My problem is to stand up here and remind you that change is here. I now walk around with this in my hand as my grandchildren do. Most of you need to have no papers on you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Murray. All righty. Welcome to the bus committee meeting. Oh, pardon me. Sorry, Mr. Jacobson.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon this time. On a few bus routes. I'm a resident of Travis on Staten Island. I use S62, and I brought it up before. S62 sometimes, especially on weekends, misses out some of its time slots. A couple of weeks ago, I believe it was on Saturday, I had to wait for about an hour for S62, after which passing College of Staten Island, which is a very busy spot. It took in so many people it had to miss a few stops later on. Just passed them by, people had to board different buses. That happens frequently. I think far from shedding some buses in favor of other routes, I think S62 needs to increase its amount of buses because it takes in a lot of people at College of Staten Island. Another problem with S62 and S61 is that on the ramp at Staten Island Ferry Terminal, there is no clear distinction where each of them stops. So people get confused. Sometimes you have to run around a little bit. You think S62 is going to stop here, instead it stops there. M15, the M15 Select service was already discussed here. It's nice to hear those numbers, but as a sporadic user of that route, I do not notice, honestly speaking, a lot of riders on it. I do not notice that it's faster by any significant amount of time than M15 regular, and I find it very inconvenient that sometimes we've got two separate bus stops for the same route on the same block. At the end of block you would find, say, M15 regular, or at the beginning of the route.
Excuse me, just
yes.
Because your time is up, if you wouldn't mind to make an arrangement with Norman, right? And you two could discuss this further. Does that sound good? Okay, so
right.
Robin, can you get his phone number? And then, I'm not trying to be rude. I think I'm giving you where
no, it's all right.
You'll be able to
I mean, I quickly had a couple other things, but I can, I guess.
Okay, one more minute, please.
Oh, all right, thanks. Another problematic route is B1 in Brooklyn. It's supposed to run every 10 minutes, sometimes more often. In reality, especially in in the early evening, 6, 7 p.m., sometimes it won't run for an hour. Then it's 4 buses in a row. A friend of mine lives in Brighton Beach area and works in Kingsborough College. He sometimes has to take car service instead of B1. And one last thing, I notice this happening quite frequently, people talking to the bus drivers on many different routes, talking to them while bus is in motion. This is a clear violation of what's written right above the front window, and I think some drivers probably need to be instructed to remind people, hold on their questions until the bus stops. Because it's both wrong to violate this rule as such, and it's also potentially dangerous.
Thank you very much. Okay, and you and Robin, you'll get the information. Okay, we're moving at lightning speed so we can get to the Bridges and Tunnels meeting in 10 minutes. Go.
Okay, we'll turn the floor over to John Hine to go over the operations report. Should we do the minutes first? And work plan? Oh, sorry. Minutes in the work plan, don't we have to approve them?
We have to move the minutes. I moved the minutes for the...
I moved that the minutes be adopted.
Okay. Also, there are no changes to the work plan?
Correct.
We don't have to vote on it. Okay, next.
We voted on the minutes?
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Operations, John Hine.
Good morning. The performance highlights for the month of July of 11 and the past 12 months are on pages 12 and 13 of the committee book.
Thank you, Norman.
For the month of July, combined bus MDBF was down 4.2% compared to July of 2010 levels. AM pullouts were down by 0.4%, and PM pullouts by 0.1 as compared to July of 2010. Completed trips were down by 0.2% from July of 2010. Over the 12-month period ending July 11, combined MDBF fell by 9% compared to the prior 12-month period. AM and PM pullouts as well as completed trips all fell by less than 0.5% during the recent 12-month period. The number of buses over 12 years old in New York City Transit and MTA bus fleets has doubled in the past year and now represents over 30% of these fleets. That completes the operations report, and I'd like to introduce Steve Vidal for the safety report.
Thank you, John. Our comments on June's customer and employee safety performances are referred to the results that are listed on page 14. The 12-month rate for combined bus collisions per million miles traveled across the 3 bus units is 4.6% higher than it was in the prior 12-month period. Although the 12-month average rate is higher, Performance has trended positive recently after we experienced the adverse impact of the December and January winter storms. Our preliminary review of July data shows this positive trend continuing to normalize and is moving the 12-month average in a positive direction. With regard to collision injuries, June showed a monthly improvement of more than 6% across the three agencies. Despite the monthly improvement, however, we are still not seeing a trend that is consistent with the overall downward movement of the collision rates. We continue to investigate forensic evidence at collision scenes and subsequent claims filed or pursued for damages so that we can identify trends and contributing factors relative to the injuries reported. The 12-month rate for both customer accidents and customer accident injuries exhibited negative monthly performance in June on a regional basis. We have isolated locations responsible for the negative trend. While the number of locations contributing to this is relatively small, we are supplementing training and in-service compliance campaigns throughout the system to reverse the trend. Additionally, to sustain the positive momentum that has been occurring, we are maintaining our existing training initiatives and oversight controls that have already been implemented and which we have highlighted during prior presentations to the committee. Finally, while the 12-month rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents is 4.7% higher on a regional basis as compared to the prior 12 months, positive monthly and 12-month average performance continue at Long Island Bus and MTA Bus Company. The deterioration in June performance at New York City Transit was immediately addressed by our buses management with support departments, and our review of July data indicates a positive result. That completes the safety report, unless there's some questions. I'd like to introduce Tom Charles for Paratransit.
Thank you, Steve. The Paratransit report is on page 16. For the month of July 2011, accessorized paratransit ridership was down 2.2% compared to July 2010 levels. Able ride ridership decreased by 4% from July 2010 levels. Over the 12-month period ending July 2011, there was a 1.1% decrease in accessorized requests for service. Able ride experienced a 10.9% decline in requests for service over the same 12-month period. Favorable no-show trends continued in the month of July as accessorized and able ride passenger no-shows declined by 34.5% and 42.9% respectively. Finally, we have an update to the taxi card program. As of September 17th, year to date, there were approximately 17,200 transactions that averaged $12.62, inclusive of gratuity and the accessorized fare of $2.25. We are working with the Taxi and Limousine Commission to reconcile trip data with card transaction data. Our next phase is to test the prepaid debit card on select vehicles assigned to the broker for black card service, which would increase this program to customers in the outer boroughs. This completes the Paratransit report. Now Tom Del Silva will present the financial and procurement reports.
Good afternoon. I'll start with the fixed route ridership report on page 15 of the book. For the month of July 2011, average weekday ridership at all three agencies fell when compared to July 2010. Long Island Bus average weekday ridership fell by 0.7% in July as compared to the prior July. MTA Bus fell by 1.7%, and New York City Transit Bus fell by 4.3% for that same period. With regard to average weekend ridership in July, Long Island Bus was up 2.8%, while MTA Bus fell by 0.8%, and New York City Bus weekend ridership fell by 4.2% in July. For Express Bus ridership on weekdays, New York City Transit fell by 2.1%, and MTA Bus fell by 3.2% in the month of July. When we look at preliminary ridership data for August, we see decreases in average weekday ridership at all three agencies compared to the prior August 2010. For August 2011, average weekday ridership was down 5.8% in New York City Transit, 3% in MTA Bus, and 3.3% in Long Island Bus. Now, August weekday results were partially impacted at the very end of the month by Hurricane Irene, and we'll detail those results next month. There's actually bigger impacts on the weekend, obviously, but at the October meeting, we'll go into more detail on August. For the expense and revenue budget report summarized on page 17, we're now making financial comparisons to the mid-year forecast, which were included as part of the July financial plan. Year-to-date through July, farebox revenues were down across the three agencies when compared to the mid-year forecast. MTA Bus was 1.4% below budget. Long Island Bus was also 1.4% worse than the forecast for fare box revenue, and Transit Bus was down 0.4%. And overall, fixed route fare box revenues are running $3.7 million less than forecast through July year-to-date. But on the expense side, we have favorable results in July 2011 year-to-date for non-reimbursable accrued expenses. MTA Bus was below forecast by $4 million through July, and New York City Transit Bus was below forecast by $63 million. A good portion of that is timing, but the underruns against budget in those two agencies are basically due to a combination of vacancy levels, reduced overtime spending, substantial paratransit economies in New York City Transit, and the timing of labor expenses. With regard to Long Island Bus, through July they were $800,000 over forecast through July due to a negative pension re-estimate we received after the July plan was put together. And if there are no questions, that'll conclude the finance and ridership reports, and I'll swing into procurement.
Just a comment, Tom.
Sure.
And I find it interesting that Long Island Bus had a ridership increase on the weekend, and the other two divisions did not.
That's been pretty consistent,
And that's
Andrew.
because Long Island Bus is the only one of the three that didn't have service cuts.
No. We've seen a steady uptrend in Long Island Bus weekend ridership. It hasn't bared out on the weekday. I defer to Norm in terms of more specifics.
No, Long Island Bus had service reductions. Most of them impacted the weekday, but Long Island Bus did have service reduction. On weekends, there was probably one or two small ones. But as Tom said, the weekend trend in Long Island Bus has been continuing as we've normalized and adjusted the service out there for the last couple of years.
I was just going to ask that same
I have it
question.
saved for the end.
That's toward the end.
I have that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There are 4 procurement actions in the committee agenda beginning on page 69 for approval this month, totaling $9.5 million in expenditures. 3 of the procurement actions are non-competitive and 1 is a competitive action. I would like to highlight 1 of the non-competitive actions. On page 76 of the book is a modification to an existing New York City Transit paratransit contract with Stratagen Systems. The modification has 3 components. It includes programming changes to the paratransit scheduling and dispatching software to allow for additional functionality for trip-by-trip feeder service and fixed route service to be incorporated into the scheduling system, funding for scheduling software support and maintenance for a 2-year period, and reprogramming of the IVR, or the interactive voice response system software, so it would integrate with the revised scheduling software, as well as expanding IVR system capacity. These enhancements are an integral part of the efforts to reduce paratransit operational costs while still improving overall service quality. And I will now ask if there are any questions on the 4 items in the agenda.
I move that the procurements be adopted.
Okay, all in favor?
Okay, Norm gets the floor for service change section.
Okay, in terms of service changes, there are 3 service changes included as information items in this month's agenda, 2 for MTA Bus, 1 for New York City Transit. The first MTA Bus service change on page 77 of the agenda is a service revision to the Q40 local route. This revision would revise the northbound path of the Q40 to use 143rd Street to travel between 135th Avenue and Rockaway Boulevard symmetrically with the current southbound path in South Jamaica, and would allow use for a wider street than the existing northbound path, which is the reason for that we're implementing this change. And it also actually provides symmetrical service to it's not bordered by the Van Wyck Expressway, which this current route path is. The second, does anybody have any questions? Okay. The second MTA bus service change on page 82 of the agenda is for a revision, a very small revision, the Q65 travel path in College Point at its northern terminus to improve service reliability by using 14th Road instead of the current narrow path along 111th Street.
In the case of a change like that, where you'll have to walk a block, do you put signs up where the revised bus stops are? So that
Oh, sure. We will do that. Sure.
For how long a period do you do that?
They're laminated paper, so they have they're not weatherproof. But we try to keep them up for about a 2-week period or so. And by then...
And the same will happen on 140th Street?
Yes. The same exact thing would happen there, yes. The last service change, which is repetitive of what you heard earlier, is to implement specific elements of bus rapid transit on 34th Street with the M34 Select Bus service. As I said, this was discussed earlier. Note this does not affect the high volume of express bus operation on 34th Street, which is only in the westbound direction. Are there any other questions?
About the M34, unless we're getting a whole presentation on it, are we?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I can try to answer Peter's...
The books have said that you will not be putting the fare machines at the ends of the route because there's less people using the service at the ends of the route.
Mm-hmm.
So hypothetically, you could walk from 11th Avenue to 12th Avenue, get on the SBS, and the Eagle team will see that you got on there and will not ask you for your for proof of payment?
I'll have to get you that answer. I don't know exactly how they're going to administrate that.
Peter has just walked in case we want to ask the question again.
Peter, the question was on the stops that you won't... You heard the question? Okay.
Because I don't want it to be reminiscent of the Tompkinsville thing.
First of all, I'm sorry, I was just
Sure, Peter,
a second.
So it said in the book that the fare machines will not be placed on the ends of the 34th Street SBS route.
Right.
So hypothetically, you could, if you were getting on at 11th Avenue, you could walk to 12th Avenue, get on, and the Eagle team would not expect that you would have paid a fare.
Correct. These are actually generally even closer than that. They're, for example, coming up to the Port Authority bus terminal, it's like a 2-street block. There are very few people getting on in those sites. There are a reasonable number of people getting off, so we didn't want to discontinue the stop. But it was the most efficient point is, yes, you would be able to ride without paying between those two stops. But most of the people doing that are just to get to another bus route where they pay. So.
But it wouldn't be just between those two stops, because if you got on at 12th Avenue and you wanted to ride at 1st Avenue, you could.
No, this is only in the outbound direction. So across the street going the other direction, there is a machine, and you would be expected to.
That wasn't clear in the books.
It's only the short direction.
Right.
It's in the short. That's not at all clear in the books. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you all.
Okay, information items. Beginning on page 94, this month's agenda includes as information the semi-annual report on service quality indicators and the passenger environment survey for New York City Transit's Department of Buses, and it covers the first half of calendar year 2011. The measure of bus weight assessment remains statistically unchanged when comparing the first half of 2011 versus 2010. There were also 38 local and express bus passenger environment indicators that were measured. 31 of them remained unchanged and 7 declined in the first half of 2011 relative to the same period in 2010. And page 95 lists what those 7 declining indicators are. Peter Cafiero again is here if there are any particular questions on that.
Just one. We're not meeting goal in most of the boroughs. I just wonder, is that because of the age of the buses? With a weight assessment, the goal is 84.1%, and we're below that just about everywhere except for Queens on average. I'm just wondering if there's an explanation or.
We'll look into that with operations in more detail. And I can't speak to how the goal is set, but this is the one area where we measure bus performance out on the street, and so it's subject to traffic and everything else going on in the city.
So what would you attribute then in 2010 and 2011 the fairly low hit rate for bus announcements that are understandable or correct?
Freddie, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, there's a few things that contribute to that. We always had a compliance issue with our bus operators in terms of I think the highest we've gotten in the last 10 to 15 years was 50 to 60%. So it's been a historical problem. We're trying to address that in forthcoming bus procurements in terms of bus technology and moving the bus operator away from that process. Also, in terms of the audibility of it, a lot of our buses are old. The PA systems come across very scratchy and unaudible. So between technology and bus operator compliance is really the driving issue there.
Okay. The committee agenda just also includes as information this month the monthly allocation of the 2011 mid-year forecast for both MTA Bus and Long Island Bus. The Department of Bus mid-year forecast is part of New York City Transit's package. That's it for the information items section, and if there's interest, I'll provide an update on the Long Island Bus transition. Okay.
I know we've been forced to, as always, to rush through this meeting, but does anyone have any questions? The Long Island Bus? Yeah. Okay. Me too.
Okay. Since Veolia was announced as NASA's selected private operator in June, there still is no formal contract as of this morning that's been signed between the two parties. They have been close. I received word before I came here that within the next few days they expect both parties to sign the agreement. Nassau County advises that they also expect to bring that agreement to the county legislature for approval in mid-October, before our October board meeting. We've been doing a significant amount of internal work between the three parties in terms of data sharing meetings. They've overseen bus inspections and facility inspections. Next Monday on October 3rd, New York State DOT begins full inspections of every single fixed route and paratransit vehicle in the fleet in conjunction with re-registering the vehicles by the end of the year to their private operator from MTA. Veolia also began traffic check counts at bus stops along certain and selected Long Island bus routes this month. New York City Transit has taken the lead and is in the process of preparing a draft MOU along the lines of Westchester's agreement for use of the AFC MetroCard system between Nassau County, Veolia, and New York City Transit. So that's underway. The first draft should be going from transit to the other side probably by next week. There are other real estate issues that still have to get resolved that have been addressed in a preliminary fashion related to the utilization, and these would need MOUs and agreements too. Utilization of the Mineola Intermodal Center, which involves also Long Island Railroad, and the important 165th Street bus bays at Jamaica Terminal, which is shared. It's a facility that's leased and it's shared by New York City Transit, MTA Bus, and Long Island Bus. Last week, the first round of internal informational sessions for all current Long Island Bus employees began, and they continue tomorrow and Wednesday. These sessions are covering pensions, health benefits, and other such benefits like deferred comp, essentially related to what the provisions are with separation of employment. Additional sessions are going to be held in a similar human resources type vein in October and November with impacted employees. Veolia also held a series of off-site informational sessions at the Marriott near Nassau Coliseum for existing employees, which detailed job opportunities that would be effective January 1st, and they've set September 30th as the date for which existing employees, based on their information, would receive preference for jobs, and they are externally advertising beyond that if they don't receive enough or don't wind up with enough employees who are currently a Long Island Bus. I tried to just hit on the key points. I think that's it for what we would have now. Obviously, if there's any questions, we'll field them.
Is it going to happen?
Let's put it this way. It's a riddle. All I could say is that we've been waiting for the contract to be signed between the two parties now for a fair amount of time, and we're waiting. We're doing everything we can on our end to facilitate.
I had three questions, and that was question one was, is there anything that either Viola or Nassau County has asked of MTA that we have not yet done?
There is nothing now. We did have a back and forth with them over what kind of particular employee data to provide, because they wanted to model some benefit information, pension information, but that was worked out between their legal side and our legal side, and that's been provided, and I think we fielded and answered all the final questions they had last week, so they have that now. There's nothing outstanding that is of note that we have. We've answered 3 very voluminous data requests. We've kept, obviously, records of everything, but in some cases, things can't proceed in some areas where they would be looking for more from us until the contract is signed.
Right. Second thing is, are there any facilities that MTA owns, MTA or any of its agencies own, that Viola is going to use for which they will either purchase or pay a rental or lease fee during their operation?
I mentioned Mineola. There has to be some MOU arrangement on that because we also have Long Island Railroad involved. Right. There may also be a piece of Mitchell Field that's owned by the Long Island Railroad that could have an impact on the CNG facility if they want to expand, because that was something we would be looking at in the capital program. So that's another area, but there's been less conversation on that because I don't believe that they have determined where they want to go with that aspect of it yet. With regard to the MOU on AFC, the fare boxes are actually owned by the MTA, so that's going to be worked into the agreement as well. And we haven't had any further word from them. There are vending machines at the Hempstead Intermodal that they haven't given any indication yet whether they want them to be retained there. We've given them a lot of data in terms of MetroCard sales there, so they're evaluating it, but no, I don't think they've made a final decision on it yet, or at least told us what it is.
Okay. And then I just had one other...
Oh, I mentioned 165th Street also, in terms of...
Well, he mentioned that before, that they would be... The third issue is for any current employee of Long Island Bus who does not take the offer to go to Viola, for lack of a better legal term, do they get preference in any positions at either MTA Bus or New York City Bus?
That's under discussion right now in terms of with labor relations, legal, and human resources. Obviously, there is attrition and there are opportunities for similar type work, but there's been no final decision in terms of how we would proceed with that because there are pension issues primarily and other associated issues with doing that with represented and non-represented employees. It's not finalized.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So you just said that there's no right of employment for a Long Island Bus employee to bump somebody in another of the bus companies? Or you're not clear?
Again, I'm not a lawyer, but the right of employment to bump I don't think exists. This is a non-civil service situation.
Okay.
There would be dealing with vacant positions that come up.
And unrelated question. I mean, is it the expectation that they are going to duplicate the current route structure?
They've committed publicly, and by all indication from what they've asked us for, they've asked us for all of the current service levels, headways, picks, etc. They've committed publicly to participating in the fare structure and the service level that we have today for 2012 only. There has been no guarantee, no mention of anything beyond 2012. Which obviously will have to be duly noted in the MOU on the AFC system if that changes.
Are we cheering for one side, the other side, or nobody?
We're cheering for the riders of Nassau County.
The riders and the employees.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm